The second generation of Pokemon seems to be one of the most popular generations for many reasons. You can travel back to Kanto, we saw new evolutions to Generation 1 Pokemon. All around, it was a nice improvement over Red and Blue as well, and they were recently announced to be released on the 3DS Virtual Console this fall. The Water Starter Pokemon Feraligatr and the Fire Starter Pokemon Typhlosion are both pretty good with their own hidden abilities, and then there's Meganium, which is probably the worst starter Pokemon ever. If you guys are unfamiliar, in this series we take a look at some of the worst Pokemon in the game and discuss if they are completely useless or if they have some sort of viable use. Each Pokemon will be rated on a scale 1 to 5 based on their offense, defense, versatility, move pool, and overall viability. If a Pokemon doesn't excel in any of these categories, then it is deemed to be one of the worst Pokemon in the game. If one of the Pokemon discussed in this series happens to be one of your favorite Pokemon, I do apologize, but just because a Pokemon is your favorite doesn't mean that it is safe from being one of these videos. If you guys enjoy this and want to see more, make sure you subscribe and leave a like, and don't forget to check out the full playlist link in the description to see what Pokemon have been featured thus far, and leave a comment down below letting me know what Pokemon you want to see featured on this series in the future. Keep in mind that Pokemon that aren't fully evolved count for very obvious reasons, because we all know that a Pidgey, a Magikarp, a Rattata, they're not good Pokemon. We know this. This is from a competitive standpoint, and you're probably never going to use a Magikarp competitively in a standard metagame. To give a brief overview on Meganium, Meganium is a mono-grass type Pokemon that was introduced in the second generation with the abilities Leaf Guard and Overgrow, which are both not the most useful abilities. Meganium has a stat distribution of 80 in HP, 82 in attack, 100 in defense, 83 special attack, 100 special defense, and 80 in speed. Now these stats really don't look too bad, to be honest. You have 100 in both defenses, an okay speed stat of 80 for a bulky Pokemon, and usable offensive attack stats in the low 80s. Its hidden ability Leaf Guard makes it so it can't be status in the sun, which isn't that great if you compare it to Feraligatr's hidden ability of Sheer Force or Typhlosion's hidden ability of Flash Fire. Meganium definitely has the worst hidden ability of the three starters. Now let's take a look at some of the positives. For the first positive, 100 in both defenses and 80 in HP. Meganium has some pretty okay bulk. It's really not bad. Like I say in all of these videos, if a stat is 100 or more, that is pretty good for this series. 80 in speed as well for a bulkier Pokemon isn't that bad. I always like it when bulky Pokemon have a decent speed stat. 80 is not that fast, but it's not the worst. You will outspeed other bulky things, which is always nice. You also have access to utility moves such as Aromatherapy, Leech Seed, Light Screen, Dragon Tail, and even Synthesis, which is actually very nice that you have reliable recovery on this thing. You also have usable attack stats. That's another positive. Having two pretty okay attack stats. Like for a bulky Pokemon, I feel like having stats in the 80s is okay. If this was a more offensive Pokemon, it would be kind of bad. But considering the fact that this is designed to be a bulkier Pokemon, having 2 attack stats in the 80s, really not that bad. You also have access to Swords Dance with physical moves like Earthquake, Outrage, Iron Tail, and Petal Blizzard. Combining that with Swords Dance, you can definitely do some damage. You are a little bit too slow to pull it off, but it is definitely a positive having a setup move as good as Swords Dance. And now for the negatives. Meganium has very, very little special coverage. Its physical coverage is definitely a little bit better. It's not the best, but it's definitely better than its special coverage. It also has 2 pretty bad abilities. Like I mentioned earlier, the ability Leaf Guard, the hidden ability, really not that great, especially compared to the other 2 starters. And Overgrow and all those abilities like Overgrow, Blaze, and whatnot, they're really not that great as well, especially on a defensive Pokemon. You're also pretty much outclassed by Tangela in the lower tiers. Tangela's not a bad Pokemon, to be honest. It has 100 special attack. With an Eviolite, it has a lot of bulk. It also has access to Regenerator. All around, I would feel like Tangela is just better than Meganium. And for the last negative, overall, you just have a pretty shallow move. You have some okay utility options. You do get Petal Blizzard, which is cool, and Earthquake, which is very nice coverage for this Pokemon as well. But overall, it's really shallow. So for some ways that I think this Pokemon could be improved is if you give it less special attack and more physical attack, or even vice versa. I feel like it would benefit more from a higher physical attack set because of the better coverage, but you can make the argument for special attack because of moves like Giga Drain, pretty good to have on a defensive Pokemon. But I really don't see the point of having 2 attack sets like this. If it had like 100 attack, I feel like this thing would actually be pretty somewhat viable. And also if it had a better ability. If you look at the counterparts, again, Feraligatr and Typhlosion, they have 2 good hidden abilities. Meganium does not. Maybe if it got like Regenerator or something, that would be really, really good. And now if it got Regenerator and like 100 attack, I think you'd argue that's better than Tangela in the lower tiers, which is pretty awesome because Tangela's actually my favorite Pokemon. And now for the ratings. For offense, I will give Meganium a 2 out of 5. This might be a little bit generous, but attack stats in the 80s are somewhat usable, and 80 speed really isn't the worst for a bulky Pokemon. You also have access to Swords Dance, which does help it a bit offensively to warrant the 2 out of 5. I can see the argument for a 1, but I'll be a bit generous because this is designed to be a bulkier Pokemon. For defense though, I will give Meganium a 3 out of 5. Meganium has actually pretty decent bulk, 8 in HP, 100 in both defenses. On top of that, you have access to Leech Seed and Aromatherapy, which will even help your defenses more. Grass isn't the best defensive typing in my opinion, because I feel like Hidden Power Ice and Hidden Power Fire are the two most common hidden powers, and Fire and Ice coverage in general is just really common. But you do have access to Light Stream, which just helps, so I think a 3 out of 5 is pretty decent because it's really not that bad, but it's not exactly good. For versatility, I will give Meganium a 1 out of 5. Now, there are a few options you have with Meganium, but outside of a max HP and having max in one of the defenses, there really isn't any other good options for Meganium. Your coverage is poor, especially on the special side, your physical coverage isn't the best, and even if you run SD, you pretty much get hard-walled by a flying type. I feel like this is one of those Pokemon where there's pretty much only one set to run, and that's just a defensive set. For Movepool, I'll give it a little bit of a weird rating of a 1.5 because I feel like it doesn't really deserve a 1. I feel like a 1 would be completely useless. You do have some nice options, you know, getting Swords Dance is nice, getting Earthquake is really nice as well. Having Synthesis is amazing because a lot of the times, the biggest issue with lower tier Pokemon that are bulky is they have no reliable recovery. Meganium has that with Synthesis, which is great. And for Viability, I will give Meganium a 2 out of 5. To be fair, Meganium is probably one of the better Pokemon featured in the series so far, and I've even seen Meganium drafted in a few leagues in the past, which is kind of surprising. Now, you do get outclassed by a lot of grass types like Tangela, but I feel like Meganium has somewhat of a place with a small degree of viability to somewhat warrant the 2 out of 5. I think Meganium could be pretty fun to use, and I think the fact that it gets SD and Earthquake could be hilarious to use at times. And that is Meganium. Let me know what you think of Meganium in the comments down below. Personally, I really don't think Meganium is that bad. It is probably the worst starter Pokemon we've seen so far, but make sure you leave a like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments down below what Pokemon you want to see featured in this series in the future. Keep in mind, again, that Pokemon that get good Mega Evolutions and Pokemon that aren't fully evolved don't count for obvious reasons, and don't forget to check out the full playlist link in the description to see all the Pokemon that are featured in this series so far. So that being said, I hope you have a good rest of your day. I will see you guys next time, and bye-bye.